I spent 28 years pouring my soul into every floorboard and pipe of this house, only for my own son to call me a burden and exile me to the basement.
He thought he had finally broken me. He was so busy playing the devoted son on a fake website page to steal $32,000 in donations that he didn't realize I'd found his messages. He didn't know I saw him laughing about how easy I was to manipulate, or how he tried to forge my signature to hijack a $185,000 insurance policy meant for his own son. He thought he was just waiting for me to die so he could inherit it all. But while he was busy bragging to his fiancée's family about owning my home, I was quietly signing the papers to sell it for $336,000 cash. He's about to learn that the man who built this house is the same one who can take it all away with a single signature. 28 years is a long time to stay in one place. It's long enough for the saplings I planted in the front yard to become giants that shade the entire roof, and long enough for the house on Alder Street to become less of a building and more of a living record of my life. I'm 70 now, and my joints ache when the Michigan winter settles into the valley, but when I run my hands over the banister of the staircase, I don't just feel wood. I feel the hours I spent sanding it down after Cole, then 5 years old, decided to test his new pocket knife on the oak. I built this life with my hands. I was a school maintenance man for 3 decades, a job that taught me that nothing stays fixed unless you're willing to get dirty and look at the problem from the inside out. I replaced every rusted pipe in this crawl space, laid every tile in the kitchen, and shingled the roof myself when the 2008 storms tried to peel it back. My wife, Helen, used to sit on the porch swing I hung for her, watching me work. She's been gone a few years now, and the house felt too big the moment her laughter stopped echoing through the halls. But it was my house. Every creak in the floorboard was a familiar voice. Then Cole came back. He's my youngest, 39 years old, and always looking for the shortcut that doesn't exist. He had a good job once, managing an appliance store, but he made a bad call on some inventory. Something he still blames on market fluctuations rather than his own ego, and lost it all. When he showed up on my doorstep 3 years ago, he looked broken. He said he just needed 3 months to get back on his feet. I'm a father. When your son is drowning, you don't ask how deep the water is, you jump in. I told him he could stay, no rent required. I paid the heating bills, the water, the property taxes. I even gave him a secondary card on my bank account for emergencies and groceries. But 3 months turned into 3 years, and the emergencies started looking a lot like high-end electronics and steak dinners. At first, Cole was helpful. He'd help me move the heavy ladder or drive me to my checkups. But slowly, the gratitude began to rot. It's a subtle thing. The way a man stops saying thank you and starts acting like your kindness is a debt you owe him for the privilege of his company. He stopped looking for work. He spent his afternoons on the couch I'd paid for, scrolling through his phone while I was out in the yard, pulling weeds that my knees told me to leave alone. Then came Brianna. She's 35, works as a dental receptionist, and has a way of looking at my house like she's already decided where the new curtains should go. Cole told her he was a co-owner. He let her believe that this property was a joint venture, a legacy he was already managing, and Brianna, wanting a stable future, leaned into that lie with both feet. The atmosphere in the house changed. It wasn't a home anymore, it was a contested territory. They started talking about modernizing things I'd spent years perfecting. They spoke over me at the dinner table, discussing the wasted space in the house as if I weren't sitting right there, holding my fork. The breaking point didn't come with a bang. It came with a quiet, entitled request that felt like a slap in the face. They were in the kitchen, the scent of a takeout dinner I'd paid for, lingering in the air. Cole cleared his throat, not looking me in the eye, which is always how he starts a play. "Dad," he said, leaning back in his chair, "Brianna and I have been talking. After the wedding, we're going to need more room, you know, for privacy. We're thinking we'll take the master bedroom upstairs." I stared at him, my heart doing a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. "That's my room, Cole. It's been my room and your mother's room for nearly 30 years. I know, he said, waving a hand dismissively. "But you're one person and you're barely in there. It's too much space for you to maintain. We thought, well, the utility room in the basement is plenty big. You've got your tools down there anyway. We could set up a nice little bed for you. It'd be like your own private suite." He was talking about the storage room, a concrete-floored space next to the furnace, filled with old boxes and the smell of damp earth. He wanted to move his father into the cellar so he could play king of the castle in the room where I'd held Helen's hand as she took her last breath. "No," I said. My voice was steady, the way it was when I used to tell the high school kids to stop running in the halls. "I'm not moving into the basement of my own house." Cole's face shifted. The devoted son mask slipped, and the bitterness underneath flared up. "Are you serious? I came back here to take care of you, Dad. I sacrificed my independence to make sure you weren't rotting away in this old museum by yourself. And now you're being selfish?" Selfish? I felt a heat rising in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. "I pay for the food in your stomach and the roof over your head, Cole. You haven't paid a utility bill in 3 years. "That's exactly the problem," he snapped, standing up. "You're obsessed with the past. You're a burden, Arthur. You're just lingering here, holding on to things you don't even need. If you can't be a team player, maybe we need to look at other options. I've seen the way you forget things lately. Maybe you're not fit to manage this place anymore. Once the title transfers, I'll have half a mind to put you in a home where they actually know how to deal with people your age." The threat was clear. He was already thinking about transferring the title. He was already planning my exit. I could have ended it right there. I could have stood up, pointed to the door, and told him he had until sunrise to get his things out of my house. I have the deed. I have the law on my side. But then I saw Jamie. My grandson was standing in the doorway of the living room, his backpack slumped over one shoulder. He's 12, and he has his grandmother's eyes, quiet and observant. He'd heard it all. The anger, the disrespect, the threat to put me away. Jamie is the only thing Cole ever got right, and the boy worships the ground his father walks on. If I threw Cole out now, I'd be the villain in Jamie's eyes. I'd be the angry old man who kicked his dad onto the street. More than that, I saw something in Cole's eyes I hadn't noticed before, a total lack of shame. It wasn't just a tantrum, it was a conviction. He truly believed he was the victim. He truly believed he was entitled to everything I had built. If I kicked him out now, he'd just find someone else to leech off of. He'd never learn. He'd just keep failing and blaming the world. And I realized that for years I had been fixing Cole the way I fixed a leaky faucet, just tightening the valve enough to stop the drip for a few days, but never replacing the worn-out washer inside. "All right," I said quietly. Cole blinked, stunned by my sudden shift. "What?" "I'll move," I said. I looked past him at Jamie, who looked relieved but confused. "If you need the room that badly, I'll go downstairs." Cole smirked, a triumphant, ugly little look. "Good. It's for the best, Dad. You'll see." I didn't say another word. I went upstairs, grabbed a few boxes, and started packing my life into the basement. I didn't do it because I was afraid of him. I didn't do it because I was weak. I did it because you can't truly see the extent of a rot until you let it grow. I wanted to see exactly how far Cole would go when he thought he had finally broken me. I wanted to see the man my son had become when he thought no one was looking and no one was pushing back. As I set up a cot next to my workbench, surrounded by the shadows of the water heater and the smell of cold concrete, I felt a strange, cold clarity. I've spent my life maintaining things, keeping the heat on, the water running, the walls standing. But sometimes, as any good maintenance man knows, a structure is too far gone to save. Sometimes you have to let the old foundation crumble so you can see what's actually worth keeping. I sat on the edge of that cot, listening to the muffled sounds of Cole and Brianna laughing in the kitchen above me. They were celebrating a victory they hadn't earned. They thought they had won the house. They had no idea that by moving me to the basement, they had just given me the best vantage point to watch their entire world fall apart. Living in the basement of the house you built feels like living inside a rib cage. You hear the heartbeat of the home, the hum of the furnace, the rattle of the pipes, the heavy thud of footsteps overhead. For 28 years, I was the one walking on those floorboards. Now, I was the one listening to them groan under the weight of a son who thought he'd finally pushed me out of his way. The utility room wasn't meant for living. It was a place for my workbench, my rusted cans of paint, and the memories of every repair I'd ever made. But after I yielded the master bedroom to Cole and Brianna, I set up a small cot near the water heater. I told myself I was doing it for Jamie. I didn't want my grandson to see his family splintering over a room. I thought if I just lowered my head and stayed quiet, the storm would pass. I was wrong. You don't fix a foundation by letting the rot spread. The discovery happened on a Tuesday, about a week after I'd moved down. I was rummaging through a box of old manuals, looking for a receipt for the dishwasher when I found my old tablet. I'd bought it years ago, but after my knee surgery, 18 months back, I'd let Cole use it to help manage my medical bills and the household accounts. I'd even given him a limited power of attorney then, trusting him to handle the paperwork while I was stuck in a rehab chair. I plugged it in, the screen flickering to life with a low battery chirp. When the home screen finally loaded, it was like opening a door into a room I wasn't supposed to see. Cole hadn't logged out of his accounts. A notification banner was still sitting there, a message from one of his friends. So did the old man cave? I felt a cold prickle at the back of my neck. I shouldn't have looked. A part of me wanted to put the tablet face down and pretend I was still the devoted father he claimed to love, but I'm a maintenance man. When you smell gas, you don't ignore it. You find the leak. I opened the thread. Yeah, he's in the basement now, Cole had replied. Didn't even put up a fight. He's a pushover man. Once Brianna moves in officially, he won't have the balls to say a word. The house is basically mine already. Another message followed, sent a few hours later. The old man is easy to manipulate. I've got him convinced I'm his only hope. He's just lingering now. Just got to keep him quiet until the wedding. I sat there on my cot, the light of the screen casting a pale, sickly glow over my hands. Pushover. Easy to manipulate. This was the son I'd fed, the son I'd housed for 3 years without asking for a dime in rent. This was the man I'd been trying to save from his own failures. My heart didn't race. It grew heavy like a lead pipe. I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen until my eyes burned. But the messages were just the beginning. The leak was much deeper than I thought. The next morning, I didn't go upstairs for coffee. I waited until I heard Cole's car pull out of the driveway. Then I climbed the stairs and called Marissa Kent. Marissa has been my lawyer for nearly 20 years. She knew Helen, and she knew exactly what this house meant to me. Arthur, she said, her voice sharp with concern, you sound different. Is everything okay? I need an audit, Marissa, I said, my voice sounding like gravel. Everything. The bank accounts, the house title, the insurance. I need to know what's been happening while I was looking the other way. It took her 48 hours. When she called me back, I went to her office instead of talking over the phone. I didn't want Cole to overhear a single word. Marissa sat across from me, a thick manila folder between us. She looked like she'd aged 5 years since the last time I saw her. "Arthur, I don't know how to tell you this," she began, "but Cole has been busy." She slid a document across the desk. It was my life insurance policy, a $185,000 benefit I had set up specifically for Jamie. I wanted my grandson to have a head start, something his father never quite figured out how to use. "The beneficiary was changed 3 months ago," Marissa said quietly. "It's no longer in a trust for Jamie. It's been changed to a direct payout to Cole." I looked at the signature at the bottom. It looked like mine. The loops of the A, the way the trailed off. But it was too perfect, too deliberate. "I never signed this," I whispered. "I know," Marissa said. The insurance company flagged it because they were waiting for a secondary confirmation, which I blocked this morning. "It looks like it was traced from your old medical records from the surgery." He was stealing from his own son. He was willing to strip Jamie of his future just to line his own pockets. The betrayal felt like a physical blow to the gut. But it didn't stop there. Marissa showed me the statements from the secondary bank card I'd given him for emergencies. Over the last 6 years, he'd siphoned off nearly $24,000. It wasn't spent on groceries or repairs. It was spent on high-end tech, fancy dinners with Brianna, weekend getaways, and the most galling part, the deposit for their wedding venue. I walked out of her office feeling like a stranger in my own skin. I drove back to Alder Street, but I didn't go inside. I sat in my truck watching the house. It looked the same, the white siding, the green shutters I'd painted myself, but it felt like a hollow shell. That's when my neighbor, Martha, saw me. She's lived next door for 15 years and usually minds her own business, but today she walked right up to my window, her face clouded with worry. "Arthur, I was so sorry to see that page," she said, clutching her cardigan. "I didn't realize things had gotten so bad. We all wanted to help, but we didn't know you were, facing all that." I frowned, rolling down the window. "What page, Martha? What are you talking about?" She looked confused, then pulled her phone out of her pocket. "The fundraiser. The one Cole started. It's all over the neighborhood Facebook group." She handed me the phone. There it was, a GoFundMe page titled "Help Save My Father's Home." There was a photo of me from last Christmas, looking tired and older than I felt, standing in front of the house. The description was a masterclass in fiction. It claimed I had lost my pension, that I was drowning in medical debt, and that the bank was days away from foreclosing on the house I'd lived in for 30 years. It called Cole a devoted son who was working 3 jobs just to keep his father from being thrown onto the street. "People have been so generous," Martha said, her voice trembling. "It says here he's raised over $32,000. I felt a surge of cold, white-hot fury. $32,000. Money given by well-meaning people, my friends and neighbors, based on a lie that made me look like a pathetic, broken man. And I knew exactly where that money was. It was in the new designer sofa I'd seen them move into the living room yesterday. It was in the expensive catering deposit Brianna had been bragging about on the phone. He wasn't just living off me. He was harvesting me. He was using my life, my reputation, and my face as a commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. I handed the phone back to Martha. "Thank you," I said. My voice was eerily calm. I didn't know about the page. "Oh, Arthur," she whispered. "Is it true? Are you losing the house?" I looked at the home I had built, every brick and every beam. I thought about the basement I was currently sleeping in while my son toasted his success upstairs with my money. "No, Martha," I said, turning the key in the ignition. "I'm not losing the house, but someone is." I didn't go inside and scream at him. I didn't demand he leave. That's what a manipulated old man would do. A maintenance man knows that if you just patch a pipe that's completely corroded, it'll just burst somewhere else. You have to shut off the main valve. You have to drain the system. I went back down to my basement. I sat at my workbench, surrounded by my tools, and I began to make a list. I didn't use a tablet this time. I used a pencil and a legal pad, the way I've always done things. I had the proof. I had the bank statements, the forged insurance documents, and the screenshots of the GoFundMe scam. Cole thought he was the one in control because he'd moved me to the cellar. He thought being out of sight meant I was out of the game. He was wrong. From the basement, I could see the foundation clearly. I could see the rot, the cracks, and the termites. And for the first time in 3 years, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to fix this relationship. I was going to dismantle it, piece by piece, until there was nothing left for him to hide behind. I heard the front door open upstairs. I heard Cole's laughter, followed by the clinking of glasses. They were celebrating something. Maybe a new piece of furniture. Maybe just the fact that they thought they'd finally won. I looked up at the ceiling, at the floorboards I had laid with my own hands. "Enjoy the view, Cole," I whispered to the empty room, "because the floor is about to fall out from under you." The basement of the house on Alder Street had always been my sanctuary, but that evening it felt more like a courtroom. I sat at my old scarred workbench, the same one where I had taught Cole how to hold a hammer 30 years ago. In front of me weren't tools or plumbing fixtures, but 3 sets of documents that weighed heavier than any lead pipe I had ever lugged. I waited. Above me, I heard the familiar rhythm of the house, the muffled voices of Cole and Brianna, the sound of a kitchen chair scraping against the linoleum I had laid myself. Eventually, I heard Cole's heavy footsteps on the stairs. He came down looking annoyed, wiping his hands on his jeans. He probably thought I wanted him to help me move a heavy box or check a fuse. "What is it, Dad?" he asked, his voice laced with that practiced, weary patience he used when he wanted me to feel like a burden. Brianna and I were right in the middle of looking at catering menus. I didn't look up immediately. I smoothed out the papers on the workbench. "Sit down, Cole," I said quietly. My voice had the steady, flat tone I used when a job was particularly difficult, the kind of tone that meant the talking was almost over. He slumped into the stool opposite me, his eyes flitting over the papers. I didn't make him guess. I slid the first document toward him, a printout of the GoFundMe page featuring my face and a pack of lies about my poverty. Next, I laid out the bank statements showing the $24 he'd siphoned off my secondary card for his vacations and deposits. Finally, I placed the insurance beneficiary change form, the one where he had tried to forge my name to steal $185,000 from his own son, Jamie. The silence in the basement was absolute, save for the hum of the water heater. Cole's face went through a series of rapid changes, confusion, then a flash of panic, and finally a cold, hard mask of defiance. "I know what you've been doing, Cole," I said. I didn't yell. I didn't have the energy for it. "You didn't just take my room. You've been harvesting my life. You're stealing from me, from your neighbors, and most importantly, you're stealing from Jamie." I gave him the terms I had spent all night drafting. "I'm giving you 72 hours, I told him. "First you shut down that fraudulent fundraiser and return every cent that's left to the donors. Second, you go to the insurance company and withdraw that change of beneficiary. That money stays in a trust for Jamie. Third, you sit down with me and Marissa and we map out exactly how you're going to pay back the $24 you took from my accounts." I looked him in the eye, searching for a flicker of the boy I used to take fishing. "If you do this, I will help you. I'll help you find a lawyer to deal with the fraud fallout. I won't pay your debts, but I won't leave you to drown if you finally take responsibility." Cole didn't even look at the papers. He let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "You think you're in a position to give me orders? Look around, Arthur. You're living in a cellar." He leaned in, his eyes narrowing. This house is my reward. I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who takes care of you. You're 70 years old and you're clearly losing your grip on reality. If you try to push this, I'll have you declared incompetent before you can even call Marissa. I'll be the one managing your assets, and you'll be watching the sunset from a room with padded walls. The threat was a physical weight. My own son was telling me that if I didn't let him rob me, he would use the law to lock me away. It was the moment the last string of hope finally snapped. For years, I had been fixing Cole's life, paying his bills, and smoothing over his mistakes because I thought that was what a father did. I realized then that I wasn't being a good father. I was being a bad mechanic. I was patching a system that was fundamentally broken, and by doing so, I was letting the rot destroy everything I had built. "Get out," I said. "Dad." I said, "Get out, Cole." He left, stomping up the stairs with the arrogance of a man who thought he had already won. He didn't realize that a maintenance man knows the blueprints better than anyone else. He thought he owned the house because he occupied the master bedroom. I knew I owned the house because my name was on the deed and my sweat was in the mortar. The next 72 hours were a blur of cold, logical precision. I didn't wait for his deadline to expire. His reaction had been answer enough. I spent the morning at Marissa Kent's office. We moved with the speed of a well-oiled machine. First, I revoked the power of attorney I had granted him after my surgery. Then, I contacted the bank and the insurance company, flagging every account for fraud and locking the secondary cards he had treated as his personal ATM. Next came the most painful part, the will. I sat in Marissa's quiet office and dismantled the future I had imagined for Cole. In the new version, Cole would receive nothing directly. I left him my first set of tools, the ones we had used together when he was a child, along with a letter. The rest of my life was carved up for those who actually deserved it. 55% into a rock-clad trust for Jamie's education and health, 25% for my daughter Emily, and the remaining 20% to a local charity that provides free home repairs for low-income seniors. "Are you sure about this, Arthur?" Marissa asked, her pen hovering over the paper. "It's a big step." "I'm sure," I said. "I've spent too long trying to buy his love. It's time I started protecting the people who actually need it." But the biggest decision was yet to come. I drove back to the house on Alder Street and sat in my truck for a long time. I looked at the roof I'd shingled, the porch I'd built, and the treehouse I'd constructed for Jamie. Helen and I had planned to grow old here, but she was gone, and the house had become a battleground. Helen had once dreamed of a smaller place near Riverside Park, a place with less maintenance and more peace. I realized that holding on to this house wasn't honoring our past, it was anchoring me to a tragedy. I was keeping the house for a version of Cole that didn't exist. I told Marissa to put the house on the market, but quietly. I didn't want a for sale sign on the lawn yet. I wanted a clean break. Within a week, Marissa found a buyer. A young couple with 2 small children. They didn't want to flip it or tear it down. When they walked through the yard, the husband pointed at the treehouse and told his son, "Look at that, buddy. That's where you are going to play." They loved the garden Helen had tended and the solid feel of the oak floors. They offered $336,000 cash. I accepted immediately. With that money and my own savings of $142,000, I found a 2-bedroom condo near the park, just like Helen had wanted. It had an elevator, a balcony overlooking the trees, and most importantly, a guest room specifically for Jamie. It was simple, safe, and it was mine. And mine alone. The final piece of the plan was the paperwork. Under Marissa's guidance, I had a formal notice of termination of residency drafted for Cole. By law, he had 45 days to vacate the premises. I went back to my basement room that night and lay on my cot. I could hear Cole and Brianna upstairs, probably discussing their wedding guest list or what color they wanted to paint their new living room. They had no idea that the bank accounts were frozen. They had no idea the house had already been sold. They had no idea that in 45 days, the kingdom Cole thought he had stolen would vanish into thin air. I wasn't doing this to be cruel. I was doing it because I finally understood that saving Cole was the very thing that was destroying him. As long as I provided the floor, he would never learn how to stand. I closed my eyes, listening to the house one last time. It was a good house. It had served us well. But the man who built it was finally moving on, and this time I wasn't leaving any tools behind for someone else to break. The dining room table was a piece of solid cherry wood I had refinished myself 20 years ago. I knew every knot in the grain and every slight indentation where a younger Cole had once pressed too hard with a pencil. That night, as I sat at the head of the table, the surface felt colder than usual. I had come up from the basement, trading my work clothes for a clean button-down shirt, but I still felt the chill of the concrete floor in my bones. This was the family financial planning dinner Cole had insisted on. Brianna was there, looking hopeful and a bit anxious, sitting next to her father, Thomas Shaw. Thomas was a man I respected. He ran a small construction supply yard and had the calloused hands to prove he had worked for every cent he owned. My daughter Emily sat to my right, her eyes wary and sharp, while Marissa Kent, my lawyer, sat at the far end of the table with a leather briefcase that held the weight of the last 3 decades. Cole was in high spirits. He had ordered an expensive spread of food using the secondary credit card he didn't yet know was a dead piece of plastic. He laughed easily, playing the part of the successful provider, the man who had stepped up to manage his aging father's affairs. "Thomas, we really appreciate you and Brianna coming over," Cole said, pouring wine with a flourish. "I know we've discussed the wedding costs, but I wanted us all here to see the foundation we're building on. This house isn't just a building. It's our equity. It's our future." Thomas nodded slowly, his eyes shifting to me and then back to Cole. "I've put up $18,000 for the wedding, Cole," Thomas said, his voice level. "That's a lot of money for my family. Before we move forward, I need to be sure about the living situation. You said the title transfer was happening this month?" Cole didn't even flinch. He leaned back, the image of a man in total control. "Exactly. Dad and I have already hammered out the details. He's moving into a smaller, more manageable space, and the house is being signed over to me and Brianna as a wedding gift. It's the right move for everyone. Right, Dad?" He looked at me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that was really a warning. He expected me to nod, to play the role of the fading old man who was grateful for his son's care. I looked at Thomas, a man who had worked hard for his $18,000, and then at Brianna, who truly believed she was starting a life on solid ground. I felt a profound sense of exhaustion. I had given Cole 72 hours to fix this himself, but he had chosen to double down on the lie instead. "No, Cole," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a saw through soft pine. "I never agreed to that, and I haven't signed a single paper giving you this house." The table went silent. Cole's smile faltered, his face turning a blotchy red. "Dad, come on. You're getting confused again. We talked about this in the kitchen last week." "We did talk," I replied, "and I told you then that I wasn't leaving my home for a storage room. But you didn't listen. You never do." I looked toward Marissa. "Marissa, would you please show them the first set of documents?" Marissa opened her briefcase with a clinical, detached efficiency. She slid a thick document across the table toward Thomas and Brianna. It was a signed sales agreement. "This house was sold 4 days ago," Marissa stated, her voice echoing in the quiet room. "The closing date is set. The new owners are a young family who will be moving in soon. Arthur has already purchased a condo near Riverside Park. Cole, you and Brianna have 45 days to vacate the premises per the legal notice delivered to you this morning." The shock on Brianna's face was total. She turned to Cole, her voice trembling. "Sold? Cole, you told me the deed was being prepared. You told my father we'd have $300,000 in equity to start our business." "He's lying," Cole shouted, standing up so fast his chair screeched against the floor. "He's senile. Marissa, you can't let him do this. I have power of attorney." "You had limited power of attorney for medical and utility billing, Cole," Marissa corrected him, not looking up from her files. "It was revoked 3 days ago for cause. Fraudulent activity is a very clear cause in the eyes of the law." I saw Thomas Shaw's jaw tighten. He wasn't a man who liked being played for a fool. "Cole," Thomas said, his voice dropping an octave, "what about the wedding deposit? You told me you put down $12,000 of your own money from your business bonus to secure the venue." Cole stammered, his bravado crumbling. I did. I had savings, Thomas. I didn't let him finish. I picked up the tablet from the sideboard, the same one where Cole had left his secrets exposed, and turned it toward the table. I opened the GoFundMe page. There was my face, looking frail and broken, under a headline begging for money to keep me from the streets. "This page has raised over $32,000, I said, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed by a cold hand. Money stolen from our neighbors, from people who thought they were helping a veteran and a neighbor. Cole used that money, the charity he stole using my name, to pay for your wedding deposits and the new furniture upstairs." Brianna let out a small, choked sound of disgust. She looked at the tablet, seeing her fiancé's name as the organizer of a scam that used his own father as bait. "And there's one more thing," I said, looking directly at my son. I wanted him to see the hurt in my eyes, though I knew by now he might be blind to it. "Marissa, the insurance documents." Marissa handed over the report from the insurance company. Cole attempted to forge his father's signature to change the beneficiary of a $185,000 policy, she explained to the room. That policy was meant for Jamie, to ensure the boy had a future. Cole tried to hijack it for himself. The room didn't explode into shouting. It was worse than that. It was the sound of a family's respect being hollowed out completely. Thomas Shaw stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't look at Cole. He looked at his daughter. "Brianna," Thomas said, "get your coat." "Cole." Brianna's voice was hollow. She looked at the man she was supposed to marry as if he were a stranger. "You were going to steal from your own son? You were going to let people think your father was a beggar just to pay for a party? I didn't care about the house, Cole. I cared about who I thought you were. But there's nothing here but lies." She reached up, her fingers trembling, and slid the engagement ring off her finger. She placed it on the cherry wood table, the table I had built, the table where Cole had just lost everything. It made a small, sharp clink that seemed to ring out for an eternity. When the door finally slammed shut behind the Shaws, the silence that followed was heavy. Cole stood there, staring at the ring, then at the sales contract, and finally at me. The shame didn't turn into an apology. In a man like Cole, shame usually turns into a weapon. "You happy now?" he spat, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and desperation. "You destroyed it. You destroyed my life. You humiliated me in front of the only people who actually gave a damn about my future. You're a bitter, selfish old man, Arthur. You'd rather see me on the street than see me succeed." I stood up. My knees ached, but I stood straight. I looked at the son I had spent 3 years trying to save, the son I had made excuses for until there were no excuses left. "I didn't destroy your life, Cole," I said. My voice was steady, rooted in the hard truth of the floorboards beneath us. "You did that when you decided that your father was a resource to be mined instead of a person to be loved. I'm not taking anything from you today. I'm just stopping you from taking things that never belonged to you." I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned and walked back toward the basement stairs. I had 45 days to pack my tools and the few memories that weren't tainted by this night. As I descended into the shadows of the cellar, I heard Cole's fist slam against the cherry wood table. It was a hollow sound. The house was sold, the lies were gone, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. The first morning in my new condo near Riverside Park was quieter than I expected. For years, I had grown accustomed to the background noise of the house on Alder Street. The heavy, entitled thud of Cole's footsteps overhead, the low murmur of his voice on the phone planning his next shortcut, and the constant, nagging anxiety of wondering which of my bank cards he was swiping at that very moment. Now, there was only the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the sound of the wind through the trees in the park across the street. I stood on my small balcony, looking out at the morning mist, and for the first time in a decade, I didn't feel like I was bracing for a collapse. I had sold the house for $336,000. After paying off the remaining small mortgage and setting aside the trust for Jamie, I had enough to buy this two-bedroom place outright. It had an elevator, which my 70-year-old knees thanked me for every day, and a guest room that was permanently reserved for Jamie's weekend visits. Emily came by often, too. We'd sit on the balcony with coffee, and for the first time, our conversations weren't about what to do with Cole. We talked about her work at the library, about Jamie's grades, and about the books she thought I should read. But a man like me can't just sit on a balcony and watch the grass grow. My hands have spent 50 years working, and they didn't know how to be still. I joined a local volunteer program that provides free home repairs for seniors living alone. It's simple work, fixing a leaky faucet, installing a grab bar in a shower, or repairing a loose floorboard that's become a tripping hazard. It doesn't pay a dime, but the currency is different. When I see the relief on a widow's face, because she doesn't have to worry about a running toilet she can't afford to fix, I remember why I loved maintenance in the first place. It isn't just about pipes and wood. It's about making a space safe for the person who lives there. In those quiet moments under a stranger's sink, I did a lot of thinking about my son. I had to face a hard truth that no father wants to admit. I had been the one holding the wrench that kept the rot in place. For years, I thought I was loving him by paying his debts, ignoring his lies, and smoothing over his failures. I thought I was his safety net, but looking back from the clarity of my new life, I realized I was just a bad mechanic. I was patching a system that was fundamentally broken, and by doing so, I had taught Cole that he never had to worry about the structural integrity of his own life because his father would always be there with the mortar and bricks. I realized that the most loving thing I ever did for my son wasn't letting him stay in my house. It was selling the house out from under him. By refusing to save him from the consequences of his own choices, I finally gave him the one thing he actually needed, a reason to change. Cole didn't change overnight. The news I got through Emily and Marissa was grim for the first few months. When the accounts were frozen and the house was sold, he had nowhere to turn. Brianna was gone, and her father Thomas had made it very clear that any attempt to contact them would be met with legal action. Cole was forced to move into a cramped, shared apartment with 3 other men who didn't care about his excuses or his business ideas. He took an entry-level job on the maintenance crew of a large apartment complex. It was hard, dirty, thankless work, the kind of work I had done for 30 years. For the first time, he was the one being called at 2:00 a.m. to fix a burst pipe. He was the one dealing with angry tenants. He was the one who had to show up on time or lose his paycheck. He had to attend financial counseling as part of his agreement to repay the money he'd stolen through the GoFundMe scam. I didn't call him, I didn't send him money. Every time I felt that old urge to reach out and fix things for him, I looked at the photo of Helen on my mantel and reminded myself that he had to learn to stand on his own floorboards. 14 months passed, then a letter arrived. It wasn't a long, dramatic plea for forgiveness. It didn't have the grand, sweeping promises he used to make when he wanted something. It was a simple list of facts. He told me he had been at the same job for a year and had been promoted to a lead technician. He listed the amounts he'd had paid back to the donors of the fraudulent fundraiser. He mentioned he was seeing Jamie again, but only under the supervision of Jamie's mother, and he admitted that he wasn't ready to handle the boys' trust fund yet. At the end of the letter, he didn't ask to move back in or for me to put him back in the will. He just asked one question. I heard you're volunteering with the senior repair program. Could you use an extra pair of hands for a day? I didn't write back a long emotional response. I sent him an address and a time. Saturday, 8 a.m. Bring your tools. When I pulled up to the small, weathered house of Mrs. Gable on Saturday morning, Cole was already there. He was leaning against an old truck, wearing work clothes that were stained with grease and dust. He was thinner, and there was a hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The look of a man who knew what it felt like to earn a day's wage. I got out of my truck and grabbed my toolbox. We stood there for a moment, the morning air cold between us. I didn't hug him. I wasn't ready for that, and I think he knew it. I didn't tell him. I forgave him. Forgiveness is a long road, and we were only at the first mile marker. Mrs. Gable has a leak under her bathroom sink, I said, my voice professional and steady. The shut-off valve is corroded, and the tailpiece is rusted through. I've got the parts. You know what to do? Cole nodded. I know. We went inside. For the next 3 hours, we worked in near silence. It was a familiar dance, but the rhythm had changed. In the past, Cole would have spent half the time complaining about the smell or trying to find a way to finish the job faster. Now, he just worked. He lay on the cold bathroom floor, his hands steady as he gripped the basin wrench. When he made a mistake, forgetting to apply the Teflon tape correctly, I didn't take the tool from him. I didn't do it for him. It's going to weep if you leave it like that, I said, standing in the doorway. Take it apart and do it again. He didn't argue. He didn't roll his eyes. He just sighed, unscrewed the joint, and did it again until it was right. When we finished, Mrs. Gable came into the room, her eyes bright with gratitude. She tried to offer us a few dollars, but I patted her hand and told her to keep it for her groceries. She looked at Cole and said, "Your son is a very hard worker, Mr. Lane. You must be proud." I looked at Cole. He was wiping his hands on a rag, looking down at the floor. He didn't look like a king in a master bedroom anymore. He looked like a man who had just done an honest day's work. "He's learning," I said. It was the truest thing I could say. We walked out to our trucks. I locked my toolbox and turned to him. The sun was high now, warming the Michigan air. "There's another house next Saturday," I said. "A man named Mr. Henderson needs a new water heater element. It's a cramped crawl space, heavy lifting." I didn't ask if he wanted to come. I didn't make it a request. I just put the information out there, a foundation for him to build on if he chose to. Cole climbed into his truck and started the engine. He looked at me through the window, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the boy I used to go fishing with, before the greed and the shortcuts had clouded his heart. "I'll be there, Dad," he said. I watched him drive away. My heart was still guarded, and the house on Alder Street was still a memory I wasn't quite ready to visit. But as I got into my own truck, I felt a sense of peace that no master bedroom could ever provide. I had spent my life fixing houses, thinking I could fix people the same way, with enough patience and enough materials. I was wrong. Some things have to break completely before they can be rebuilt on a foundation that will actually hold. My son was finally building his own foundation, one honest repair at a time, and as a maintenance man, I knew that was the only way a structure ever stays standing for the long haul. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard of the house we had just finished repairing, I watched Cole load his tools into his truck. There were no grand emotional speeches or sudden bursts of tears. Instead, there was something much more valuable. A shared silence between two men who had done an honest day's work. I realized then that by finally refusing to be his safety net, I had given him the only thing that could actually save him, the necessity of standing on his own 2 feet. I wasn't just a bank account to him anymore. I was a father again, and he was finally becoming a man. As I headed back to my quiet condo, I knew the road to full forgiveness was still long, but for the first time in years, the foundation between us was built on solid ground rather than lies. This story serves as a powerful reminder that patience is not a license to be exploited, and true love does not mean shielding those we care about from the consequences of their own actions. Arthur spent years fixing Cole's life, only to realize that he was actually preventing his son from growing. Real love requires the strength to set boundaries and the courage to stop saving someone so they can finally learn to save themselves. Sometimes, the most compassionate thing you can do is to stop being the flaw that someone else walks all over. Thank you so much for watching and following Arthur's journey. If this story resonated with you or taught you something about the importance of boundaries and self-respect, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps me continue to share these impactful stories with the world. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.
That girl is a runner, she was born to get away. Hear that two-tone humming, headed out to the highway. I should have seen it coming through the years left in the dust. But after all the lessons learned,